Many rivers to cross. The harder they come, the harder they fall.
Hi, this is Jimmy Cliff. And in case you don't know who that is, it is I who say you can. An artist loves to connect with people of all ages, of all groups.
Great sadness that we bring this news to you, that the great Jimmy Cliff has transitioned. Jimmy Cliff has died. We don't like to use the word die, especially when we talk about people like Jimmy Cliff, because they will never die. These people's work will live on forever and ever for generations upon generations to come, just like we've seen with the great Bob Marley's works, right? So here's a bit about Jimmy Cliff, just so that the African proverb will ring true. There's an African proverb that says, you die twice. Once when you physically die and you are cremated or put in the ground, and another time you die when after you have passed physically, no one speaks of you anymore, then you die a different death. So we will speak of Jimmy Cliff now and repeatedly, so he will live on forever. Plus, I'm sure people will be playing all his works for years to come. James Chambers was his real name. Jimmy Cliff was born July of 1944, and he passed away November 24th of 2025. He was known professionally, his stage name was Jimmy Cliff. Many would have been fooled to think that his real name was Jimmy Cliff, which I did also. He was a Jamaican, ska, rocksteady, reggae music, and soul musician. He played multiple instruments. He was a stellar singer and an actor as well as a businessman. At the time of his death, he was the only living reggae musician to hold the Order of Merit, which is the highest honor that can be granted by the Jamaican government for achievements in the arts and sciences. And before my Jamaican people come for me, they're going to say, so what happened to the Order of Distinction? Because people like Sizzla and Capleton and these people have gotten that reward as well. Well, the main difference is the level of achievements in the fields recognized. So the Order of Merit is for eminent international distinction in specific fields like science, arts, or literature, while the Order of Distinction is for outstanding and important services to the nation in basically any field. The Order of Merit is also much rarer, limited to a maximum of 15 living recipients to any one time. So you won't find more than 15 people alive holding the Order of Merit. And it is a much rarer, much coveted award then, right? Okay, and at the time of his passing, Jimmy Cliff is the only reggae musician to hold that award. Jimmy Cliff was best known among mainstream audience for songs like Many Rivers to Cross, You Can Get It If You Really Want, Many Rivers to Cross, and You Can Get It If You Really Want, The Harder They Come, Reggae Night, Hakuna Matata, and his covers of Cat Stevens' Wild World, Johnny Nash's I Can See Clearly Now from the film Cool Runnings, that was Jimmy Cliff singing. He starred in the film The Harder They Come, which helped to popularize reggae around the world. And Club Paradise, Jimmy Cliff was one of 5 performers who were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And he got into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame back in 2010. Jimmy Cliff was born James Chambers on the 30th of July, 1944 in St. James. He began writing songs while still in primary school in St. James, listening to the neighbor's sound system when he became 14, his father took him to Kingston, where he would take up the stage name Jimmy Cliff. As for his career, Jimmy Cliff sought out many producers while still going to school and still trying to get his songs recorded without much success. He also entered talent contests a lot, looking for that breakthrough. One night, he said, I was walking past a record store and restaurant as they were closing, pushed myself in and convinced one of them, who was Leslie Kong, to go into the recording business, starting with me, he writes in his own website biography. After two singles that failed to make much impression, his career took off when Hurricane Hattie became a hit while he was just 17 years old. It was produced by Kong, with whom Jimmy Cliff remained friends until Kong's death from a heart attack back in 1971. Jimmy Cliff later local hit singles including King of Kings, Dearest Beverly, Miss Jamaica, and Pride and Passion. In 1964, Jimmy Cliff was chosen as one of Jamaica's preservationists at the World's Fair in New York City. And in the same year, Jimmy Cliff was featured in a program called This Is Ska, alongside Prince Buster, Toots and the Maytos, and Byron Lee and the Dragonaires. He soon signed an Island Records record label deal and moved to the United Kingdom. Island Records initially and unsuccessfully tried to sell Jimmy Cliff to the rock audience, but his career took off in the late 1960s. His international debut album was Hard Road to Travel, released in 1967. It received excellent reviews and included Waterfalls, composed by Nirvana's Alex Simpoulos and Patrick Campbell-Lyons, which became a hit in Brazil, and it won the International Song Festival as well. Waterfall was followed by 1969 by Wonderful World, Beautiful People, and then Vietnam in 1970, both popular throughout most of the world. Bob Dylan called Vietnam the best protest song he had ever heard. Who would have thought that a little boy from St. James in Jamaica would have written songs like Vietnam, where Bob Dylan would say, "This is the best protest song I've ever heard." Also, during this period, Jimmy Cliff released a cover of Cat Stevens' Wild World as a single, but it was not included on his Wonderful World, Beautiful People album. In 1972, Jimmy Cliff starred in Ivanhoe, Ivan Martin, in the classic reggae film The Harder They Come, directed by Perry Henzell. Now, as the film tells Martin's story, he is a young man without funds, arriving in Kingston from the countryside. He tries to make it in the recording business, but without much success. Eventually, he turns to a life of crime. The soundtrack album of the film was a huge success that sold very well around the world, bringing reggae to an international audience for the first time. It remains one of the most internationally significant films to have come out of Jamaica since Jamaica's independence. The film made its debut in London's Gaumont Cinema in Notting Hill on September 1st of 1972. In 1976, Jimmy Cliff sang on the first season of Saturday Night Live, episode 12, hosted by Dick Cavett. After a series of albums, Jimmy Cliff took a break and traveled to Africa. The Nigeria-based Jamaican writer Lindsey Barrett was instrumental in Jimmy Cliff's first trip to the motherland and subsequently converted to Islam, taking the name of El Hajj Naim Bakir. In a 2021 interview, Jimmy Cliff expressed a strong affinity with the religious and intellectual knowledge of ancient Egypt, skepticism of government handling of the COVID-19 pandemic, and denied his earlier conversion to Islam, claiming, "It didn't satisfy my soul," he said. So basically, that was a journey, a small stop, but he didn't stop there. He continued his journey. Throughout the 1980s to the 1990s, Jimmy Cliff quickly returned to music, touring for several years before he recorded with Kool and the Gang. In 1984, Jimmy Cliff appeared at the Pink Pop Festival in Landgraaf, Netherlands. During the River Tour, Bruce Springsteen and E Street Band added Jimmy Cliff's previously little-known song called Trapped to their live set. It achieved great prominence when included on 1985's We Are the World benefit album, We Are the World, which included Michael Jackson among many other A-list names. The follow-up, Cliffhanger 1985, won a Grammy Award for Best Reggae Album, though it was his last major success in the United States until 1993. Also, in 1985, Jimmy Cliff contributed to the song Sun City, a protest song written and composed by Steven Van Zandt and recorded by Artists United Against Apartheid to convey opposition to the South African policy of apartheid. Jimmy Cliff then provided backing vocals on the Rolling Stones' 1986 album Dirty Work and appeared in the comedy Club Paradise, co-starring with Robin Williams and Peter O'Toole. And he contributed several songs to the soundtrack, including 7-Day Weekend, which he sang with Elvis Costello. In 1988, his song Shelter of Your Love was featured in the 1988 film called Cocktail. Jimmy Cliff appeared in a film called Marked for Death in 1990, performing John Crow with the Jimmy Cliff Band. His recording of You Can Get It If You Really Want was used as a campaign anthem by the Sandinista National Liberation Front in the 1990 election in Nicaragua. In 1991, he performed at the second Rock in Rio festival in Estadio de Maracana in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. He continued to sell well in Jamaica and to a lesser extent the UK, returning to the mainstream pop charts in the US and elsewhere, and even went #1 in France with a version of Johnny Nash's I Can See Clearly Now and the Cool Runnings film soundtrack for 1993. In 1995, Jimmy Cliff released the single Hakuna Matata, a collaboration with Lebo M, a song from the soundtrack of the film The Lion King. In 1997, Jimmy Cliff was a guest star in an episode of the Cartoon Network talk show Space Ghost Coast to Coast. The 2000s to the present time in 2001, Jimmy Cliff became an inaugural member of the Independent Music Awards judging panel to support independent artists. In 2002, Jimmy Cliff released the album Fantastic Plastic People in Europe, after first providing free downloads using P2P software. This album featured collaborations with Joe Strummer, Annie Lennox, and Sting, as well as new songs that were very reminiscent of Jimmy Cliff's original hits. In 2004, Jimmy Cliff completely reworked the songs, dropping the traditional reggae in favor of an electronic sound for inclusion in Black Magic. The album also included a recording of Over the Border with Joe Strummer. Cliff performed at the closing ceremony of the 2002 Commonwealth Games, and in 2003, his song You Can Get It If You Really Want was included in the soundtrack to the film Something's Gotta Give. He also appeared in July 2003 at the Paleo Festival in Nyon, Switzerland. The Jamaican government under PJ Patterson honored Jimmy Cliff on the 20th of October 2003 by awarding him the Order of Merit. This is the nation's fourth highest honor in recognition of his contribution to the film and music of Jamaica and spreading it around the world. Jimmy Cliff and Mervyn Morris are the only currently living figures from the arts to hold this distinction, and Jimmy Cliff is the only living musician to do so. In 2007, Jimmy Cliff performed at the opening ceremony at Cricket's World Cup. In the spring and summer of 2021, Jimmy Cliff embarked on an extensive tour of the US and Canada. And in 2007, You Can Get It If You Really Want was adopted by the British Conservative Party during their annual conference. He was quoted in The Independent as saying, "One of my bandmates called me this morning to tell me the news. I can't stop them singing the song, but I'm not a supporter of politics. I have heard of Cameron, but I'm not a supporter. I don't support any politician. I just believe in right or wrong." In September of 2009, he was nominated for induction into the Hall of Fame following a campaign on his behalf by the American Charles Earl. Jimmy Cliff reacted to the news by saying, "This is good for Cliff, good for Jamaican music, and good for my country." On the 15th of December of 2009, he was officially announced as an inductee, and he was officially inducted on the 15th of March of 2010 by Wycliffe Jean of the Fugees. I say Jean or John, depending on how some people say it. Jimmy Cliff appeared in the 2011 documentary Reggae Got Soul, the story of Toots and the Maytals, which was featured on BBC and described as the untold story of one of the most influential artists ever to come out of Jamaica. In 2011, his journey continued. In 2011, Jimmy Cliff worked with producer Tim Armstrong, lead singer of American punk band Rancid, on the EP called The Sacred Fire, and the full-length album called Rebirth. Rebirth won a Grammy Award for Best Reggae Album. This was one of those times where the Best Reggae Album Grammy Award went to somebody who Jamaicans were screwing about because it was not a Jamaican. And how dare a foreigner win a Grammy for reggae music? We did not know that Jimmy Cliff was the person who was behind that. So that would make Jimmy Cliff a multi-Grammy winner then. The album was listed at number 12 on Rolling Stone's list of the top 50 albums of 2012, saying their ska, rock steady, roots reggae, a revolutionary cover of The Clash's Gun of Brixton, delivered in Cliff's trademark soulful tenor, grittier but still lovely more than 40 years after his debut. In December of 2012, Jimmy Cliff was named Artist of the Year by digital newspaper The Caribbean Journal, citing his work on Rebirth, the album that won the Grammy. In August of 2022, Jimmy Cliff released another album called Refugees. In his personal life, Jimmy Cliff, briefly a member of the Rastafari movement as well, before converting to Islam from Christianity. In a 2013 interview, he described himself as having a universal outlook on life and does not align himself with any particular movement or religion, saying, "Now I believe in science." He is married and he has a daughter, Lilty Cliff, and a son, Aken Cliff. On the morning of November 24th, 2025, Jimmy Cliff's wife, posted on Facebook that he had died of a seizure followed by pneumonia. He was 81 years old. He is also the father of the actress, singer Nabia Bey. Jimmy Cliff lived a long, storied life filled with many high points and rewards. 81 years, many of those years since he rose to prominence from 19 years old, where he got his first hit. Many of those years were spent topping charts, going around the world, being an ambassador to Jamaican culture. At the root of all that, you can actually see a storied and journeyed life, like from being raised as a Christian, to going to Africa to live for a while, to converting to Islam, then coming back to the Western world to join the Rastafarian faith, to eventually later on in life coming to the conclusion that he is of no religion, but he does believe in science. Hard proof. Yes. And with that said, we'll end it like this. It is appointed unto every man to live and to die. This is the only way we get out of here, is if you die. You don't know the minute or the hour. What you do between the time of birth and death is what will really count. If your mark was significant, if your works were good, you will be talked about for generations to come. If not, you will seem like you were never here. With that said, may this brother fly high. With the ancestors, Jimmy came, he saw, he lived, and he conquered. And definitely that song where he sings, "You can get it if you really want, but you must try, try, try." Yeah, that song will forever stand out because he lived exactly that. A little youth from St. James went around the world. And if you listen back to this that I just gave you, you will realize that he worked side by side with all the big names, not just in Jamaican culture or reggae music culture, but right across the board. Inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, that's huge. Big up to Jimmy Cliff. James Chambers, may his soul rest in peace. Leave your comments in the comment section below. I'll catch you on the next video. It's SouFLoTV. I'm out. Peace.